Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Unqbe Unplugged. As you all know, Unqbe is a boutique consulting firm working in the areas of with education and advisory, focusing on future of work. Over the last year, we have become the pioneers in setting the pace of work in around future of work in India. Most of our work is with organizations and the leadership, helping them build the organization that is future ready. And in this, we also do a lot of research, understanding the shifts, understanding the trends that are happening in market, and then working around those trends to see how do we keep the pace with the change that is happening all around the world of work. With me today, I have my colleague, Dr. Salni Lal. She is the co-founder and CEO of Unqbe. And of course, in India, whenever we are speaking about future of work, it will be very difficult not to mention her contribution so far. So welcome, Shalini. And this is the show that I'm I was looking forward to, and I'm very delighted to have because this is where we talk about the things that are happening all around us and try and interpret what holds in fold for us, right?
Yeah.
So March 2020 was a big phase. It is a big thing about the whole world of work, right? Most of us first time experienced what is known as remote work or work from home, which brought in a lot of joy with it, right? We were able to work in the comfort of home. We were able to save the whole commute time. We had good time with our family members all around. And it was also, it gave us some kind of an independence in terms of how do we manage time, right? How do we manage our work?
Mm.
So we were able to take time for some of the things that we had neglected before, like
Mm.
some of the interest areas, building skills in that matter. And like a person like me, I think it was also brilliant, because we were able to survive all the skyrocketing price of fuel, right? Because we didn't have to use that kind of vehicles for transport. So it was a huge, it was a good saving, and thank God for that. And many of us, like I moved to Pune is my home from Gurgaon, and many of us actually moved back to our hometowns during this period, which also meant going back to family, extended family, community, and a different set of relationships were built. And we really had some moments that we cherished together, kind of,
Yeah.
you know, bringing everybody together in the family. And it was also tough time, so being together with the family gave us the strength that we need to go through that kind of a tough phase. And the biggest achievement was that the at least the corporate India is not talking about productivity loss. With all that fun, with all that goodness of working from home, we actually achieved more growth, more productivity, innovation, new organizations. In a sense, really creating a kind of a history in itself. When we talk about the number of new organizations that have come into play, the kind of new
Yeah.
fields that are emerging. So it has been a huge, I think, really, like the impact of fourth industrial revolution is now visible to all of us, and it has touched us. But a big but, when we are talking about it, there is something missing, you know so like personally I feel that I miss the human touch. Like all the time it's talking to the screen, so you don't get the vibes, you don't get the feel. And when I'm talking to people around me, I also realize that people talk about, almost all of us talk about missing the cafeteria conversation with work friends, right?
Mm.
Missing all the parties, missing all the celebrations, missing all the engagement initiatives that used to happen when we were in office. And also, like sometimes when the day is not that good, right, we would catch hold of a friend in the office and go and do our own conversations talking
Yeah.
about what is not going on right, what is not happening well, and that person will be there to calm you and give you the kind of tips that you require. Or also sometimes you are into solving some problem, and you know that this is the person in that other department I can reach out to, and that person will help me solve the problems. So that those conversations are also not happening. The creep together is not happening, celebrate
Great
birthdays,
together, very important.
yeah, very important part. And
Yeah.
even I also liked the organizational gossip. That is also not happening so much.
Yeah.
So basically, everything that's a part of a connect and relationship,
Yeah.
that has been, that's something that I miss. And I, when we speak to people, most of the people are missing that, knowing the bonds that you felt. So across, if you look at, I would say that most of us know lesser number of people in the organization now than we used to know when we were uh, going to offices or visiting offices. Similarly, if I have to ask, and then my conversations with people, it becomes very clear कि somewhere we are missing the trusted friends at work. There will be always, when we will work, my go-to person or something that are happening, to the trusted friends. So that number is now, coming down. So there are people, colleagues, very good colleagues that we work together, but somehow that trusted friend is missing. And with that, a sense of a kind of a belonging, a sense of a kind of a feeling that this is my place, this is where I am from, kind of a peace is slowly, dissipating, if I can say so. Like between us, you and me, we met, right? And that meeting really helped, because when we were together, we actually didn't do any work, if you look at it. But it just
And we are sharing with everyone we didn't do any work. Absolutely
but it
right.
just it just helps to build that kind of a bond, to
Yeah.
talk to. And again, we are meeting in March, and I am actually hoping there is no work, and we have good fun together. So this is the kind of experience, and the way we look at work, the way we look at, like, there is no conversation now on work life balance, because there is more conversation about life, which is very, very good now. So suddenly, we have been studying this piece. So help us interpret what is happening around the
Sure.
world.
Yeah,
Over to you.
thank you, Papia. And a very warm welcome to all of you who've joined us. One of the delights which we have in an Uncube Unplugged session, which Papia anchors, is that please feel free to, type in your questions, observations. We have a lot more time to take any of your questions. So I see a lot of good mornings and hellos on the LinkedIn chat, and wishing you all a very good afternoon. And please stay with us for this conversation. So, as Papia, sort of set the context, we've gained some and we've lost some in this, very large transition, and a transition that we've all sort of experienced pretty much for the first time at this scale, where pretty much within days, or in many countries within hours, from working in an office with a very different rhythm to it, a very different sense of social connections, to working entirely remotely. And Papia, you so nice to describe the whole journey. So right from that whole start where people were first trying to figure out how do we get the work done, and that was pretty much top of the mind for the early months, that how will we get the work done. And with that evolved a style of management which actually started off with very strong task orientation. So because managers, leaders were under so much at that time stress that what's going to
Yeah.
happen, will the ball drop, we're still accountable for results, etc., etc. uh, the entire process started off with this very strong task orientation. Fortunately, in a few months, many organizations, many managers, I won't say everyone, but the large majority began to realize that, that isn't the best style of work when you're working remotely. And in fact, micromanagement, particularly when you combine micromanagement and remote management, is a very unproductive style. One, it's hugely time consuming. Secondly, it's extremely annoying to people who are in it. They experience it as having someone not trusting them. And so the styles of management started evolving as many managers realized that the key to successfully lead a team virtually is to trust first and then expect work to happen, which is quite the opposite of what you would have seen in the in person space, where we first expected someone to prove themselves, prove that they were capable of being trusted before that trust would be bestowed on them. But now that's not the case. If you're going to work digitally in any fashion, trust comes first, because without that, nothing's going to happen. So it started from there. And of course, the entire joy of people returning back to their workplace, etc. But where we're at today is that organizations and people both are sort of trying to find now what's next. Because just as organizations are exploring, what form of work will make sense now, and the question has shifted, right? Because people, managers, leaders have also discovered how much actually can get done. So while the limitations of remote work have also been discovered, but so have the number of places where it works just fine. And employees are very often, and in our own research we found some 70 odd percent of employees at junior levels want some form of flexibility, because as from where they sit, it sounds like everything's going on, so why should we be coming back to office and doing exactly the same thing which we're doing on our laptops in any case. So everything has shifted. Employees have shifted, leaders have shifted their stance, many psychological barriers have shifted. But in the process, one of the things that we found in our own research is that social capital, or the strength of connections within organizations, have taken a beating. And a little bit of like context to this, the concept of social capital as such is an old one. Uh, in fact, in the field of sociology, one of the most landmark articles is an article called The Strength of Weak Ties. And it's all about how do you get to know a job, like for instance that there's a job which is out there for you. Chances are that if there are a number of people who know you, not your own immediate work group, they're unlikely to be the ones who can point you to the next role. uh, but people in your broader circle, people within the larger organization, or actually far more importantly, people within the same industry or same professional capacity, or even people who know you even very very weakly, so they met you a couple of times but they know what you do, can make that connection between who you are and what kind of role you would be best suited for. So this study, which happened in the 70s, was the first time that people came to recognize the fact that it's not just our strong ties, and strong ties are strong relationships. So like you and I hopefully have a strong tie because we talk several times a day. But those ties which maybe get activated once in a few years, or once a year, or once every few months, it's those weak ties that actually count for a lot. So organizations are beginning to realize that in the process, what's happened is almost a pruning. Just the way like people prune trees, people's ties have gotten pruned over the last almost 2 years. Weak ties have pretty much fallen by the wayside, because people have far fewer opportunities of serendipitous meeting. You don't bump into people in elevators, meet at the gate, share a carpool, participate in the Diwali function, go for your whatever office marathon, go for the office picnic. None of that fun stuff or the other opportunities for connection actually happened. And therefore, social capital has become a cause of great concern. It's become a cause of great concern because there are many implications. And let's start with the implication on us as people, right? There's that very famous Gallup question: Do you have a best friend at work? Which is supposed to be one of the strongest predictors of, is someone likely to shift an organization. So if you don't have enough friendships at work, then it's very easy to move, because in a great job market like today's job market, for some talent pools at least, there are always opportunities, and it's those ties which matter in your decision of whether you should move or not. Those ties have gotten much weaker, unless managers or leaders have intuitively understood the importance of that, and without knowing any of the theory or any of the technicalities of it, have just somehow spontaneously created those occasions where people can meet, people can be human to human,
Right.
and not just task to task. Because one of the dangers in many forms of leadership over the last couple of years has been that it's been too task focused, and people have forgotten that there is an equally important responsibility of having that human to human sort of focus. So that's been one of the big shifts over the last couple of years.
Yeah, one very, very beautiful comment Vivek has sent, saying that it's taken all our body language, communication cues away from us. If I crack a joke, the returns I expect for my joke in terms of smiles and laughter are totally blocked by the mask. I think the biggest connecting vibes in our behavior that came from these two non-verbal communication is totally lost.
So well said, Vivek. Thank you for sharing. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right, absolutely right. And if it's all right, I'll just share a little bit about social capital as a construct, and we won't spend too much time on it, but uh, I'll just share what it is, so that you
Yes,
get a
that will help.
sense.
That will help.
So, social capital actually, as a construct, is a construct for a community. So, a community of people, which can be civil societies, can be countries, can be any group of people, but particularly organizations. And it's not just about, how many people do I know, which is part of, the field which very often is called organizational network analysis these days. That's one component of it. But there are actually multiple dimensions of social capital. And why is it called social capital? So I'm going to give a very simple example. Think about the quality of your family relationships. And if the quality of your family relationships are good, like you have supportive parents, basically a happy, home life with, good relationships, the odds of children in that environment prospering and doing great work are far higher than if the home environment, for instance, is very discordant. There's a lot of fighting. People don't stand by each other. They don't support each other. People don't feel that emotional sense of, my mom or my dad or my sister, brother have my back, right? So we are all very social beings as human beings. And just like in a family, when we have that sense of, connectedness that goes beyond knowing people, but extends to the many other dimensions of that knowingness, if that is strong, if the social capital of the family is strong, then everyone in that family prospers, right? That much we've all experienced in our own personal life. Whereas if the social capital of that tiny family unit is poor because of infighting or whatever, violence or anything, then it's hard. It's that much harder for anyone to prosper. People do it against all odds, but it's just much much less likely, right? So it's exactly the same thing, except now you, instead of looking at family, you look at organization as a unit,
Hmm.
because
Interesting.
every unit is a human collective. And you think of, in what environment will the organization do well and the people within the organization do well. And one part of it is how efficiently the systems are designed, how well work happens. But the other part of it, the softer part of it, are these six dimensions of social capital. And it's called social capital because there's a correlation between, if this part, it's almost like the soil, right, in which you're embedding something. If this is strong, then human capital also prospers, and frankly economic capital also prospers. So they are connected. So there are six very different dimensions of social capital, and I'll just speak about them very very quickly to give a sense of the multidimensionality of social capital. So the big one, groups and networks, that we all are familiar with, like how many people are we connected with. uh, but that itself has different kinds of bonds. There are the close bonds, like you and I have. But then there are also what are called bridges. How well does someone in, say, recruiting in HR, I'll take an HR example, know what's happening in the business? To what extent does an HR business partner understand what's happening in learning and development? To what extent does learning and development understand what's happening in say diversity and inclusion or whatever? It's how well are these different pieces connected, and not just connected from a task perspective. Do people talk to each other? Do they connect? Because once they connect in their own head, they have a picture of the whole, and what the whole is all about. They also have that sense of, if I have to do anything in any organization, and we've all experienced this, if you're a newcomer, it is 10 times harder than if you've been with the organization for a while. Why? Because you already know the people, and once you know and you have good relationships with people across the organization, getting something done is so much easier than if you don't have those connections. So what we have seen is that these connections between people in different groups have actually shrunk. The first alert on this in a very big way happened when Microsoft released their report, which was based on the Microsoft Teams data that they had been tracking almost a year ago. And their discovery was that intergroup conversations had dropped. Within work group had sort of increased, but intergroup had dropped. So there's that happened. The other thing that has happened is that far fewer connects up and down a ladder. Like if we think of who do we know in an organization, it's not just people in our teams or people, even our peers in other teams. It's like, do we know people who are senior to us? Do we know people who are junior to us? Because each has a very different picture of the organization in their mind, and our understanding of our work and organization is so connected with how we can see it play out at different levels of the organization. And that's another one which has very often, in much of the research which you and I have done, we found has sort of become much weaker because there have been far fewer opportunities of that connect.
Quite
So there's
naturally, when it is an online conversation, you prefer to keep it around a task, right? Because you're
yes,
sitting up a meeting, that meeting has a purpose, so it is achievement of that purpose or a goal or a task. So all the conversations that were non-planned, unplanned in our
yeah,
calendars, those are not happening,
yeah, yeah,
and that is
absolutely,
where the bonds, bridges, and the ladders, all of them getting
yeah.
impacted.
100%. You've explained it absolutely. That is what's happening. So if we look at, other dimensions like collective action, cooperation, like what are we doing outside of work? Like you and I will meet in March. We will be, we'll spend time there. That will be our form of collective action. We will do a lot of fun things together. So that piece has sort of very often dropped. Connected with
Shalini,
that is,
one of the
yeah,
pieces, I was reflecting back and thinking around. So, if I have to look at my work, like when I was working with Airtel, I was really proud of the work that I was doing with Satyabharati Foundation, because that used to
yeah,
give a different kind of a meaning or a purpose. And it was very different because we used to work with schools and children over there. And it just gave a different satisfaction than the work itself, right? And I felt a lot of a pride and association with the organization. When I was with Edelweiss, then there was Edelweiss Foundation, and the kind of work that I got opportunity to do over there was very different from my regular work, kind of work that I was doing. But it did give me a kind of a connect. And even after leaving the organization, like I left the organization in 2016, Edelweiss, but I'm still in touch, and I know what the foundation is doing,
yeah.
and I'm like talking about them. So it's a very different kind of a connect one gets into collective action, isn't it?
100%. You're absolutely right. And, like if I think back on my own career, and I worked with so many different organizations, I would say there was one organization which, Mafoy, Management Consultants, which I worked with, I think, almost 20 years back. But like you said, we've all stayed in touch, not all, but many of us have stayed in touch because the connection went beyond just the task. It was not just about getting a job done, but it was much more. And those interpersonal connections are very important. They're actually far more important than we realize because they impact us. Firstly, and I know there's a lovely comment by Rohit Pandey, and Rohit, we're just going to take that in a second. But it gives you a sense of, okay, I'm connected here. Uh, I'm in a place where I have trusting relationships. So I am now at peace and I can actually do my best work. When trust and solidarity is missing, for instance, and that's an important dimension of social capital, I might be spending all my time thinking, should I watch my back? Should I tell him this? Should I not tell him this? Should I tell her this? Should I not tell her this? Will she or he use this information to my good, or will they use it, you know, in a way which will not be to my good? So, you start second guessing everything. And when you start second guessing everything, we all have only that much energy and mind space. So instead of it going in anything which is good, good in the world, it now starts going into, maybe I should be very cautious here and be very careful about what I say. And all of this, how careful do we need to be when we speak? How much do we feel free? How much do we feel we can express a point of view that comes to us? It plays a great role. That's why it's called social capital, because that's what's making the organization strong or not strong. In it's so it has an impact on the individual, which is very, very personal. We all can think back to good and bad experiences, and it has an impact on the organization. So it's at both levels. I know you and I do most of our work at the organization level, where at this point we're helping organizations think through social capital, what's changed for them, what are the implications of those shifts in the post pandemic workplace they're designing. But it's equally for us as individuals. We just blossom when we are in a place where we know people and we feel we can trust them. And, it's sort of
Yeah.
interpersonal.
So suddenly, when I'm hearing you, it is also coming in my mind that somewhere looking at social capital is becoming extremely important from employee experience perspective. If you want to drive the right experiences, and it might be time for us to start thinking that how can we create those experiences remote, because remote is going to be there, even if we
Yeah.
shift hybrid, remote is going to continue like that.
Yeah.
So we will have to think of that, how do we create those situations, how do we
Yeah.
create those experiences that
Yeah.
help us to build the social capital.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Rohit has been talking about that he's an intern and doing an online internship. It is going to be difficult, Rohit, and it is actually difficult to be consistently interested in the company or our manager. And it is evident that the company, being smaller in size, are not able to figure out how to connect with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. It's a great observation, Rohit. And I'm telling you, this is probably experienced by so many people at this point, and particularly for anyone who's joined an organization during the pandemic. you know and if you've had enough, if you know people and you've built relationships in person, it's just much easier to carry them on virtually. Actually, now we are all learning, and within your comment, Rohit, which is quite a perceptive comment, lies this seed that now we are learning how to build relationships virtually. It's not easy. It requires more intentionality. It requires higher levels of skill. But given, as Papia said, that we're unlikely to return back to a world where work only happened in office, that's a skill which now is important for all of us, both as individuals, if we just want to care about ourselves and our own experience at work, but also as leaders and organizations who are creating that experience for many, many others. So yeah, it's intimately connected with our
Yes,
experience at work.
Sally, if you look at it, of course, it is very difficult for people who have joined the organization during this period. But it is particularly difficult for students who
Yeah.
are coming first time into the job market. You know, even for people who have been joining the organizations, the onboardings have been much longer, right?
Yeah.
We also used to have some program called Campus to Corporate, how the shift happens, because it's a massive shift, right? It's a
Yeah.
complete mindset, working style, understanding work, understanding relationships, and doing that online is pretty challenging.
Yeah.
And when somebody is not consciously investing in designing methods, we
Yeah.
are aware that there are organizations because who take in bulk engineering or
Yeah.
management students have invested a lot in building the
Yeah.
onboarding experience that
Yeah.
bridges some of the gaps, I would say,
Yeah.
But it's still, there is a long way to go in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
how do we build the, kind of
Yeah.
a social connect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. In fact, I think one of the things we will do is share our own findings, both for individuals, because I think many people who will be joining us here, they are looking for themselves as individuals. What is it that you can do if you are working in a, whatever, largely remote, completely remote, hybrid setting, to build your own social capital at an individual level from here on, because that will impact your employee experience 100%, but also it will impact how successful you will be.
Right.
Because just knowing, knowing two things. One is knowing the organization. And one of the things which, we've discovered in our research, Papia, has been that for newcomers, as you said, particularly students who are making that transition from, campus to corporate, one of the big challenges is that they don't have a mental map of organizational life. It's a new thing, right? It's a new whole new animal almost for them. So without that mental map of this is how organizations work, or organizational life, it's almost like it's really hard. It's really, really hard to know the big picture within which you are operating, and therefore understand, should I do it this way, should I do it that way, why is my manager saying X? Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, but what's really going on. It's very difficult to read into any of that, particularly if you're at the early stages of your career, because you simply haven't had the opportunity to develop those mental maps. So there is that part, that there's mental maps are missing. And then the other part is that the connections are missing. So if you want to get work done, you have to rely on the task interface, to get that work done. And all of us know we respond very differently when it's just the task interface, and when it's like, I know you. So, when you say something, I will be able to understand what it means much better. I'll be able to help you much better, and maybe I'll want to help you much better as well. So it's twofold. For students, it's understanding, creating the mental maps of organization, which, like Rohit, that's challenge number one. Like, as you said, be consistently interested in any company, because what is that company? Sometimes if you're a newcomer, that company is not clear. It's just 5 tasks which you have to do for the day, and that's not very exciting, right? That's not very exciting. Who
Yeah.
wants to just be checking off to-do lists? Nothing very great about that. So that's the challenge, the mental map of the organization and the connectedness with others. And when both of them come together, then you can be effective. So that's the challenge for young people who have joined the workforce in the last couple of years. And there are things you can do. And I know Papia will also probably speak to some of what is it you can do, so that you are able to build your own social capital to be successful. And of course, as leaders, it's a whole other set of responsibilities that is now important. How do you create the context of these many dimensions of social capital becoming stronger with time?
Yeah. Actually, also, we now literally have to search that opportunities or platforms where we can connect with the different people, and where we can really build a kind of an internal network
Yeah,
within the organization,
yeah,
right? And some, like in some of our conversations, some of the good practices that I heard of, actually, where people said that when they went for a skill development program together, so even if it was online, they connected with the team because they were in their learning experience and
yeah,
journey together. So they kept on chatting with each other in terms of how each other is doing in terms of their progress for that particular program. They also spoke about really looking at the organizational database, or if you have a Yammer, or you have any other connecting platform, or even on Teams, actually searching for people who have similar interest areas or similar
yeah,
expertise areas, and you want to have conversations. You go ahead and
yeah,
you write to that person, and people are generally more open to having a virtual relationships or
yeah,
interactions now. So it is much more like available to you than earlier. You will have to physically search for that person. but now virtually the access to people is has increased like anything, right? Even if you have an ideas and suggestions or a feedback, you can write to the leaders. You can just ping them on Teams or ping them on any platform that you are using, and you can make them aware of your thinking, and there is a high possibility they will ping you back saying that okay, I liked the idea, or let's talk about it, or let's catch up on the same. The one person I also came to know about people who are really getting into saying that what kind of a news item that is coming about the organization. So either putting it on Google or a LinkedIn kind of an alarm system where wherever there is a news about the organization, there is any kind of a marketing event about the organization, they come to know about it. But one skill that you certainly require is being a resourceful.
Yeah, way more.
So if you are
Yeah.
resourceful, you really, are able to find out what information is available with whom and how do I get it, kind of a place. And also making people kind of aware, where can I help. So like if I have a skill expertise, then announcing it and saying that if you have a question, come to me, like I should be able to help you with. If you have an interest getting into, the groups that have similar interests and talking about it. But there is a lot of initiatives that is required at a self level. And a person like me who is like naturally introverted, it is difficult kind of a thing. But if I identify a purpose for connection, then I'm able to do it. But if it is a purposeless, just connecting with a lot of people and doing it, I'm not able to do it. So maybe it helps to know that how will it benefit me, what will I enjoy from this conversation, what is going to be my takeaway. If you have those clarity and you start connecting within the organization, I think it can address some of the issues that come in because of remote connections.
No, that's really good points. And, for anyone who's listening in and has this, is thinking about how to build their own social capital, Papia has given some, really good suggestions. And I'll just add to that. The first is just understanding that this helps. It helps in many ways, and it's not just about being very opportunistic, although you can be, and, that's fine too. But also understanding that as our careers are long, they go over decades. Now I've been working for almost 30 years, so your paths are going to intersect with different people in different ways, and it's impossible to know what will lead to what or may not lead to anything. So it's like that, I think, general orientation of just in some way valuing for lack of another word, valuing the importance of the many relationships that we will be building through the course of our career, and knowing that they're a pretty important part of the way our careers and the way now as entrepreneurs our business also develops. So it's important, whichever way you look at it. But it's also important from a personal point of view. You can feel supported in your career versus feeling completely alone, which is, I think, very often, if I think back to my early years of career where I was extremely dumb, none of this, I mean, I didn't know any of this. I really didn't. And in fact, somehow this was not even a conversation back then, that build relationships, it's important. So I didn't value it till at least 10 years down the line, lost decade. But for anyone who's joining us now, it's important for many perspectives. It's important because it's that wealth of network connections that will help you in understanding the world. It's not just about someone helping you do get a job or something, but it's about firstly understanding the world. You get different perspectives, you get a broader understanding of what's happening in the world, to feeling like part of a larger whole, and not just someone who's doing something completely alone, but just part of this larger sort of mesh of relationships. uh, so recognizing the importance, I think, is very, very much the first step, like you said. um, The second is, yeah, I think it is sometimes it feels more challenging to introverts. And I'm also, a hardcore introvert. So I completely understand that. The only thing I've found is that uh, the fact that we are now a digital world, and you mentioned that, right, that it's easier to reach out to people, because we found that in our own research, that when we ask people, so many people in organizations which have strong online communities. Now, every organization does not have strong online communities, we know that, but we also know that organizations which have more experience and more capabilities of managing remotely, which are very often you know tech based companies or global companies, or have that mindset, they've built very vibrant online communities. And those online communities are doing an amazing job, because they are perhaps even more open to, for people to reach out to each other, build connections, than the in person world may have been, at one point in time. So there is that opening out, which is new, and it's a wonderful thing. uh, it sort of mirrors what we are seeing in many of our other, communities, like those who are on, say a Twitter community or a Facebook community or a Reddit community, for instance, are experiencing very different kinds of camaraderie in these different, online environments. And, that we're seeing some organizations, those who are skilled at it and understand the importance of how to create good virtual communities, they've managed to build some of this internally, which will really help them in the process of creating tomorrow's organization, which is probably going to be some combination of in person and digital world.
I quite liked the comment that you made about creating your own support system. When we are talking of a network or communities, it is the support system that we are developing around us. And actually, like when I started my career in HCL, that community, that kind time, the people who joined together as a part of senior management training, we are still together. It's like, it's going to be 24 years this year. And um, and now, because of their, each of them have a very different kind of a journey, but the camaraderie that we build at that point of time, we know that, that group is available to us if we need anything. And you generally, whenever I'm looking something in the network, I'm able to find somebody or else, able to
Yeah,
guide me
yeah,
through it. So it is also the guidance, the kind of expertise, the kind of things that you get in from your network, is helps you grow as an individual, helps you, really chart out your own path, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, there's the individual level, but for those of us who are watching who are managers or leaders, now some very interesting questions will, I'm sure you're already asking them, like what's going to be the form of our new organization? Will it be largely digital? Will it be some combination? Will it be back in office, as it was? And that opens out now the conversation around, okay, how do we rebuild our social capital, given the fact that, in so many organizations, uh, a bit of social capital, at least sometimes much more than a bit, has weakened in the design of, the new workplace. Understanding what has worked and what hasn't worked, where has it become weaker and frayed, and where has it actually retained its original strength, is very useful information in deciding what the new form of workplace will be, as well as in building tomorrow's leaders. Because tomorrow's leaders and are going to be multimodal. I mean, may not be in every single organization, but like the research at Stanford revealed that about 40% organizations, and that was a year ago, are thinking about some form of combination. And that means that for leaders and managers, it's not the same. You have to be now far more skilled at building and maintaining communities across multiple formats, remotely, in office, and that requires extra sensitivity to what should happen when you're in office, and what happens very well and sometimes far better when you're working remotely. How do you put these two together? How do you make sure that, for instance, young people who have joined, and young people are really of concern here, who've joined the workforce, have enough opportunity to create the mental maps professionally that they need, but also mirror skills, complex skills that you don't have an opportunity to virtually. So it requires a lot more thoughtfulness, a lot more capability and skill from managers and leaders than back in the day when, life was much simpler, either fully remote or fully in person.
And
So
Sami,
that's
you will
changed.
find that every time that we have a wave of pandemic going down, like second wave when it started to slowly become normal, or after third wave now, whenever we hear this thing of calling people back,
Mm,
calling the teams back. And one of the reasons
yeah.
why most of the organizations and leaders want to do that is because there is a feeling that it is only by bringing people back into the office
Yes. Yeah.
the social capital needs will be addressed, and it is also directly linked with the what we call a great attrition and that great resignation that everybody is experiencing around, right? So but as we understand that there is a hesitancy in employees to come back, and there is a kind of a preference for flexibility, preference for working, continue to work from home. How do you think we can build, organizations can look at building social capital remote?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to first come to your first point that a lot of organizations, every time the wave recedes, there's a move, chalo, let's go back to office. And that's because people feel, partly rightly actually, that something is lost, and we don't want to do that. We want people to feel part of the organization, meet and see and touch and feel, and three-dimensional organization, not the two-dimensional organization. And yet, as you said, employee expectations have shifted, and people are asking many more questions about, okay, do we really have to come to work every single day? Like, do we need to do that far, or is it enough that we meet some whatever less frequency? And we are seeing in our own work that hybrid is looking very different across different organizations, and many new forms of hybrid are being experimented with, right? So it comes from a fear, and it comes also perhaps from a lack of skill and capability at this point, because it's all so new, that how will we manage partly remote, partly in person well, and not having enough confidence at being able to do that. uh, and I think that's what drives this. And now to your question of how do we build social capital remotely, because I think that's been a big concern. And I think there are many different ways that depend on what that extent of remote look like. Like, for instance, if it is fully remote, where you are never ever going to have an opportunity to meet person to person, then I'll say it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. It's not that it can't be done. In fact, many global organizations have been doing it for some roles, not for the whole organization, but for a few roles for decades, because, so many global organizations have, particularly in smaller countries and smaller regions, like 3 people, 4 people, who have, often worked remotely or whatever. So there are lessons for fully remote, completely remote, almost never meeting, and a lot of that has to do with both understanding that, okay, we may be remote, but that still means the human connection has to be built. And that means we have to find ways to build those human connections, which means that structurally leaders now have to create that and build it into the way work is going to be done. And it's not just about the task, it is also about giving people opportunities to meet with each other remotely, maybe. And whether that's through vibrant virtual communities, which, by the way, I think is something many organizations should aspire for, because unless you want to stay very small, one location or a few locations, that is really will be very helpful in tomorrow's organization. So whether it is through vibrant virtual communities, or through like some of the examples which we found in managers, like setting time aside for interpersonal meetings where no tasks are discussed and you are discussing only human to human, and creating enough of them, not just with immediate work group where it is of course very very important, but also with having opportunities to meet others more broadly. So then organizations have to design this communication system very, very differently. But I think what we're likely to see is that happening still in a few roles, maybe. In fact, we'll certainly be seeing that happening in a few roles or even a few functions. But for the most part, some combination of, having opportunities to meet. And if organizations are very conscious that, okay, in our in person time, what do we want to do? We want to build trust relationships. We want to build trust relationships outside of our immediate work group, because anyway, we're meeting those people. We need to create those opportunities across work groups, across different parts of the organization. That's the mesh which we are, sort of looking at, the web of interconnectedness. We want to do that. So we want to create opportunities, right? It's not that hard. Also, some of the examples we took earlier, non-work, non-task projects are brilliant at that, whether they are fun, whether they are purpose related, like, contributing to the larger good of the world in some way, which is a super effective tactic, by the way, super, super effective. Like you said, your connection was always largest with foundations. A lot of research shows that when people come together for volunteering or in any way, activism, or in any way helping society or the world, they build very strong bonds. So whether it is creating forms of connecting for that, or hobbies, uh, cricket, dance, music, yoga, I mean, the list is endless, or just one-off fun events. So there is that whole, that part's important. But then there's also the importance of mirroring skills, which is where young people, need to have an opportunity to see complex skills in action, because people are very good at learning once they can see something being done well. It actually, we're biologically programmed. We have mirror neurons in our, brain that sort of get activated when, you're doing something well. It's activated in my brain, so I can learn very quickly. So we need to create those opportunities there as well. And of course, one thing we found works a lot easier in person is brainstorming. Energy just vibes off energy in a much easier way than fully virtual. So I think what we are going to see, and I think it'll be a journey of a few years, is managers, leaders begin to understand these different dimensions and how to put them together far better than I think any of us have known to so far.
One of the very senior banking leaders that I was speaking to, he said something very, very simple, and he said that it just opened his eyes. So, banking being an essential service, a lot of operations staff had to come to offices, even though it was a peak of the pandemic, right? Which was happening. And what he mentioned was that he would just keep on, he will pick up his phone and randomly call any employee, who was may not be very senior and all. And it became, and he will just do one-on-one conversation, basically saying thanks, grateful that you have been here with us during this journey. And it almost became like a wildfire. People started talking, who got a call, who got a call, who got a call, and he was just doing random. And he said it gave me so much information on what is happening on the ground. At the same time, I just felt so connected. And I didn't, like ever earlier think that a 5 to 7 minutes call or a 10 minutes call will make such a big difference to that employee,
Yeah.
because he's so senior. He's almost like people who do not find can imagine that they will get call from him. So it is
Yeah.
also about leaders developing a style of their own, that how can I genuinely
Yeah.
connect with an employee when you are remote, and how I can get in touch with them
Yeah.
and connect.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think we're having some trouble on LinkedIn. It, I can see a message that it's not streaming on LinkedIn at this point. Technical issue actually at LinkedIn's end, but
So, so Adhiraj is talking about human capital management augmenting with social capital management.
yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's a very good point. Like human capitalist capabilities and skills, social capitalist strength of networks, and the two do reinforce beautifully. They're absolutely distinct, but they play well with each other.
Yes, yes. Any questions that anybody would like to, ask? we have tried addressing the questions that we got earlier on.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if there is any question that anybody has that you would like to ask.
I think the LinkedIn audience is not able to connect
Okay.
at this point. That's, I think, the challenge.
So we will take the questions and we will try and address this on the LinkedIn
Yes.
to be going back. And it was a wonderful conversation. And we really, of course, we are very, very passionate about this topic. And we see a huge, huge kind of a change in the way that the work is going to happen. And the work itself, how the work itself will
Yes.
get designed over the
Yeah.
period of time coming in. And social capital is going to certainly play an important role in designing the organizations of the future. And we are very happy to talk about it more. And if you want to reach us and talk about it, just give us a message on LinkedIn, and we will connect and we will have more conversations around it. Thank you so much, Salni. I think this was quite nice to explore and talk about, because this is something that I think all of us at work are getting
Yeah.
impacted. It is not
Yeah.
a particular organization or a particular individual. I think remote working is impacting all of us. While we want to continue working in remote, there are ways that we need to think of which satisfies our emotional
Yeah.
and mental well-being,
Correct.
because it is
Yeah.
something that's coming into question, that how the mental and emotional well-being continues.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, and thanks a lot for joining, all of you. We would like to
No, thank you guys. Thank you
thank you
so
there.
much. Thank you, Papia. Thanks for all those who've joined us. I do understand we have some technical issues with LinkedIn, but what we're going to do is we're going to stream this again in the evening, so that anyone who wants to join us can share their questions at that time, which we will make sure we address. So, with
Thank
that,
you.
thank
Have
you
a good
so
day.
much. Good day.